We need to talk about Khamzat Chimaev.
I'm not the same guy like everyone. I don't think about anyone like he's dangerous for me. I don't know how to lose.
Khamzat is recently coming off his first career loss against Sean Strickland. A fight in which he had a very odd game plan, and based upon that fight and based upon previous performances, a lot of fans are starting to question how good of a fighter Khamzat truly is. But before we get the video started, my name is JuicyMMA. I make opinionated fight breakdowns. If you're ready, hit that subscribe button and let's get right into it. Ever since joining the UFC, Khamzat Chimaev has been an incredibly dominant fighter at multiple different weight classes. I've talked about this a lot on my second channel, but I personally see Khamzat Chimaev as the best wrestler in the UFC currently, and the current UFC's roster is filled with incredibly talented wrestlers, but Khamzat shines through among the rest. But not only is he the best wrestler in the UFC, but also I think Khamzat Chimaev is the best round one fighter probably of all time. It's incredibly high praise for an incredibly dominant fighter in Chimaev. But after his first career loss to Sean Strickland alongside with previous performances, I think Khamzat is starting to show cracks in his overall game that he must address. And in this video, we're going to be talking about some of those issues that I see in Khamzat's game. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So in my opinion, I think there's a couple of different issues with the game of Khamzat Chimaev, but the first and main issue that he has is his cardio. Now this has been something that I've been talking about quite a bit on many videos alongside with live streams, but essentially if you are able to survive that early onslaught of Khamzat Chimaev, which is a lot easier said than done, in the latter half of every fight that he's in, you're going to have opportunities to have success. And I think we've seen Khamzat gas out to a certain extent in 3 separate fights throughout his UFC career thus far. His most recent performance against Sean Strickland, his fight against Kamaru Usman, as well as his fight to a lesser extent against Gilbert Burns. Essentially, once those guys were able to survive round 1, rounds 2 through the end of the fight became a lot easier, and we saw these fighters have a lot more success. Sean Strickland ended up having success as early as round 2. Kamaru Usman ended up having a lot of success in rounds 2, but especially in round 3. Gilbert Burns also had a decent amount of success in round 2, as well as some success in round 3. These guys were able to have a lot more success as the fight did progress. And as dominant as Khamzat Chimaev is, if you have to get a first round finish in order to have success, that's definitely a very difficult thing to do, especially when you're consistently going up against each weight class's best fighters, and also especially once you continuously move up. As Khamzat did say after his fight against Sean Strickland that he wants to move up to the light heavyweight division, and all of a sudden at that point when you're fighting bigger fighters, it makes it that much more difficult to get those first round finishes. So yes, I do think Khamzat Chimaev's cardio is a huge issue for him, and I think it's his main issue going forward. But the next issue with Khamzat Chimaev's game is his cockiness. Now, I know this may sound a bit ridiculous, but it is a legitimate factor, because we've seen this in multiple fights, but especially in his most recent performance against Sean Strickland, where every time Khamzat isn't completely dominating his opponents, he looks to troll or he looks to talk to his opponents in some sort of way. And every time that he does that, he loses focus within the fight. And we saw that multiple times in the Strickland fight, where Khamzat would talk to Sean's corner or talk to Sean in general, and all of a sudden he would get popped with a couple of jabs. And yes, I do know Sean Strickland doesn't hit that hard. He's probably not going to finish Khamzat Chimaev, and also Khamzat has a great chin. I do understand that. But at the same time, you are losing minutes of an incredibly close fight because you're trolling or because you're losing focus in those moments. And I do think that's a big issue going forward for Khamzat Chimaev. I think he needs to put his ego to the side a little bit and just focus on the fights. But the next issue with Khamzat Chimaev's game kind of tails off the last one, but that's a lack of a head coach. And I think the reason for why Khamzat does not have a legitimate head coach comes down to an ego thing. As initially when he was in the UFC, he was training over in Sweden with the All-Stars, and I thought that was great for him. To have a head coach that can hold you accountable and game plan for multiple different opponents was definitely something that every fighter needs, not just Khamzat Chimaev. And honestly, I thought a big reason for why Khamzat ended up winning that Gilbert Burns fight is in part due to his coaches. They told him exactly what he needed to do in between rounds, and it propelled him to that victory. But honestly, ever since he left the All-Stars in Sweden, he doesn't really have a head coach. Yes, he does train with high-level fighters like Arman Jukin, and yes, he does have a jiu-jitsu guy, but outside of that, he doesn't have a true head coach that can game plan going into certain fights, that can tell him what to do in between rounds, and most importantly, hold him accountable. And I think if you watch every single Khamzat Chimaev fight ever since he left Sweden's All-Stars, it's pretty obvious to see that he does not have a head coach, as essentially Khamzat goes into every single fight with the same game plan. Shoot in for a takedown early and try to find that finish in round 1. If he is able to do that, great, but if he's not able to do that, he doesn't really have a plan B or a plan C. And when you're going up against the best fighters in the world, it's very difficult to find first round finishes consistently. And I think a real head coach would help with this. I think a real head coach would have a tailored game plan for Khamzat's opponents. Like for example, against Strickland, maybe not go all out to find that finish in round 1, tailor a game plan against Strickland and essentially be able to fight a full 5 rounds at a high level against Strickland, as opposed to going all out in the first round and more or less be forced to strike against a good striker in Strickland for the rest of the fight. But outside of just game planning for particular fights, another thing that I think a head coach would be really important for is to add certain elements to Khamzat's game. Because as good as Khamzat is, he's not a perfect fighter. There definitely are certain things that you can go to when fighting Khamzat Chimaev. And I do think in the latter half of that fight, if Khamzat was able to add reactive takedowns, that would really help out his cardio issues, and that would really help him out in general going forward. As yes, in round 1, Khamzat does a great job at shooting in for that initial takedown, and essentially against everybody, he will get it. He's that dominant in round 1, but once you get to round 2, 3, 4, or even 5, that's where it becomes a lot more difficult for Khamzat to shoot in for those takedowns. Those quick takedowns take a lot of energy, but if Khamzat had reactive takedowns, shooting in for takedowns when his opponents are essentially off balance and throwing punches over it, that would make Khamzat's life that much easier. But it's just not something that Khamzat has. As I mentioned before, Khamzat is either all wrestling or all striking. There's nothing in between. He doesn't really mix things up all that effectively, and I do think a head coach would help pretty significantly at adding some of those elements to Khamzat's game and make him that much more dangerous and make him that much better going forward. But overall, Khamzat Chimaev is an incredible fighter. He's clearly still one of the best fighters in the UFC, but I do think he's not a perfect fighter. I do think there are certain adjustments he needs to make going forward in order to live up to his expectations and in order to be the best fighter that he possibly can be. But anyways, if you want my full best bets for every card, those are only in the Juicyverse membership. That's where I go way more in depth than I can here on YouTube. And for the Juicehead members, I also drop exclusive deep dive breakdowns on the biggest fights that I don't post publicly. So if you want to take your picks to the next level and get all the extra content, hit that join button down below. Shout out to all the current members. I really appreciate you guys for supporting the channel. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Khamzat Chimaev needs to make tweaks to his game, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.
I got the feeling we taking it all the way. I gotta get to the Hall of Fame. Been on the ground with a small delay.